Good afternoon. Welcome to Who's Tom and Dick? With your hosts, Martin Weavers and Patrick Mortimer. Good afternoon, Martin. How you doing?
Yeah, good afternoon, Patrick.
Here we are again, another Friday.
Yeah, and it's another exciting day today.
Well into January now, aren't we?
I know we are, yeah.
And, yes, here we are recording from the West Suffolk Hospital again. And our second home, really, now, isn't it?
I know, you better tell them what might happen, just in case.
Well, we might have a few sounds and noises in the background, so disregard them. Hopefully they won't be too bad for you.
And telephones.
All sorts of things going off in the background. But don't worry, we're live from the West Suffolk Hospital.
Yes, we are, and we're very, very lucky that one of the units here at West Suffolk Hospital in Bury that I'm involved with, because this is where I have to come for all my appointments, is the Macmillan unit.
Yeah.
So I had the audacity to walk into the office and and ask them for an interview. And everybody backed out apart from one person.
And who is that?
So the sacrificial lamb to the slaughter is... we've got JP in with us, so welcome, JP.
Thank you, guys. Thank you ever so much
JP.
for having me. Thank you.
Do you prefer JP or John-Paul?
I normally go by JP.
Right. So we'll call you JP. So thanks very much for. Did you volunteer or?
I did volunteer, but it was a case of everybody saying, "Oh, I think JP's suited to do that." so no, obviously I think I've nominated Big Mouth and I like to talk, so that's why I put myself forward.
We did mention it to the girls when they come in. They all scattered, didn't they?
Yeah. There was three ladies when first turned up, and then now we haven't seen them for dust. So, but I'm sure they've got 100% confidence in you. So I think we ought to just sort of go back to the beginning and tell us a little bit about Macmillan, the history of it all.
Of course. So for people outside of the UK, I think kind of Macmillan, I sometimes find is household recognised name across the UK, but for those of you outside of the UK, so Macmillan Cancer Support is a national UK charity supporting cancer patients of an adult age and their loved ones and their families with various different offers of information and support that come with a cancer diagnoses. So they provide a lot of information about diagnosis and all the different treatments. They're able to provide kind of financial advice, support with local welfare and benefits applications, assisting with blue badge applications, and really just the day-to-day things at home. I think obviously we're very fortunate especially kind of in the UK, with that we've got the National Health Service to really rely on in the most part for our cancer treatment. But as times are getting harder, there's more people being diagnosed, and in the NHS things are strained. So medical appointments are very much kind of there just for medical conversations. But then, such as myself and other members of Macmillan Cancer Support, we're there to kind of really get around the patient and their families and really just support them on a day-to-day basis with the hardship that can come with a cancer diagnosis, really.
Yeah, so tell us what your actual role is.
Okay.
Within Macmillan.
Yeah. So my job title officially is what's called a Cancer Care Navigator. Now, it sounds incredibly posh and it sounds like it should come with a map, and it certainly doesn't. But what that really does, it's a navigator through the complex web of a diagnosis and just day-to-day life, as I've already said. So we provide non-medical information and support. As I say, I'm not medically trained. I'm not a nurse. I've not got any sort of medical background. But again, what we really do is we offer to contact a newly diagnosed patient as soon as we possibly can, and then just to really provide them with a listening ear service, whether that be over the phone or face-to-face at the hospital. And we also go out to GPs, surgeries, and to local community health centres so people can come and see us face-to-face, provide that psychological support through listening and kind of understanding, explaining things to people. And as I say, if they've got financial difficulties, we can hook them up with the appropriate services. If they're after a bit more in-depth psychological support, we have a counsellor that we can refer into. And then again, I think everybody's lives are unique. Everybody's got different kind of needs, concerns, questions. So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, our service is very much a mouldable service. So it can really be the type of support that each individual person needs, rather than, as I was saying, kind of having a bit of a gung-ho, here's everything for a patient at the start. Because again, we find that people are very overwhelmed just by processing their own diagnosis at the start. So again, we just try to speak to people as regularly as we can, and if questions or concerns are raised, then we will do what we can to support them with those.
So tell us more that you think we, as a person who don't know anything about Macmillan, need to know. I mean, you've obviously mentioned a little bit about the history. Take us through anything else the layman or the person on the street might need to know about it.
So the guy that actually started Macmillan was, he received some inheritance from his father. It was only a small amount of money, and he said, I want you to do something with this. So actually, he then started Macmillan Cancer Support with the money that was left from his father, and it's now grown into this massive cancer support charity, as I say, recognised in the UK. Again, you see adverts on the TV for it, so there's a lot that goes alongside with Macmillan, really. So they have got centres throughout the UK at different hospitals. There's drop-in centres in local cities as well. More particularly, what they are trying to do now, as I say, just trying to, with things like the cost of living crisis that we're dealing with in the UK, obviously that has an impact on nearly every member of the public in the UK, but particularly with people that are dealing with cancer at the same time, is trying to really adjust their services and support to the current demands of people in everyday lives. So as I say, with cost of living, they've really, the charity as a national scale, have really invested into their financial support services. So one of the main things that Macmillan provide as like a day-to-day contact is they have a charity advice line that people can call into, that's based down in London, but people can call on the phone and get support through there. And what they've recently done is invested heavily into their financial support services on there. So whereas before it would just kind of be, as I say, advice with benefits and local welfare grants and things like that, they've now really kind of branched out into more in-depth financial advice regarding kind of mortgages, life savings and all these sorts of things, to really make sure that people are getting all the advice and support that they need, because life is tough out there at the moment. It's really, really brutal. And a cancer diagnosis only makes that harder.
Yeah, I noticed on the website there was some grants issued by Macmillan.
Yes.
Who can apply for the grants?
So there is a criteria that people have to meet for the grant, and unfortunately that has changed over the last couple of years, but I believe as things stand at the moment that is open to any cancer patient where they have savings of less than £1,000.
Right.
I believe there's kind of regular income requirements that they have to check for that as well, but that is a one-off payment of £300. So again, what we quite often apply for things like that is people who are having to travel to different hospitals for their treatment. Where we are in Bury St Edmunds, a lot of our patients go over to the Edmunds Hospital in Cambridge. And as you can imagine, travelling 50 miles there, 50 miles back, and if you're going for multiple appointments, that fuel cost gets quite a lot. So something like that £300 grant can kind of go towards costs like that. Again, during the winter, what we've also done is people sometimes struggle with feeling so cold during their treatment, especially if you're having chemotherapy and it's making you feel unwell and you're feeling cold. You might need to buy some new clothes. You might need to buy a thicker duvet to have on your bed to try and keep you warm at night. So again, if people haven't got money, that's sort of the grant that we can apply there for.
Yeah.
And it really goes a long way in helping people sometimes.
We're talking about fundraising, obviously. How do we actually become a fundraiser?
Well, anybody can fundraise for Macmillan. That's the amazing thing. And there's lots of different things that they do as a national schemes. One of the most recognised ways of what people raise money for Macmillan is through their annual coffee mornings. So I believe that is one of the main ways that they raise funds throughout the year. Probably raise millions and millions of pounds every year. As I say, what you can do online is when they do the coffee mornings, you can go online to the Macmillan website, I believe, and then you can request to be sent a coffee morning pack. And basically that does, it provides you with all the different information. I think it even gives you like tablecloths for if you're doing a cake sale or something like that.
Yeah.
And it comes with the donation boxes, and then people, as I say, can hold these coffee mornings. We hold one in Newmarket last year. I went along to a patient that I was previously supported. Fortunately, she'd come out the other end of her treatment and had a very good outcome. And to say thank you, she wanted to hold a coffee morning, and I believe she raised somewhere just over £300 in one morning.
Oh,
wow.
Excellent. Yeah.
So again, it's amazing especially when we see patients who have been through a diagnosis and treatment, they've benefited from Macmillan support, and then actually they want to try and have their own kind of their token of appreciation for what we've done. Yeah. So to be able to hold a coffee morning and go along to something like that was really rewarding at the same time. So that, as I say, is one of the main ways that we can give in to Macmillan. There's means of just donating via their website as well. They do quite a lot of other different fundraising schemes. A lot of people will quite often shave their head. I think they call that Brave the Shave in Macmillan, so that's quite another popular one.
Yeah,
we couldn't do that, could we?
No comment.
I'm getting that way too. That's why I'm glad we're not on camera, actually, because I'm getting that way too. But no, there's lots of different things like that. I've heard of car washing services being done, a lot of sponsored walks. They do their mighty hikes now. So I think Macmillan do about 3 or 4 of them throughout the country each year. I know locally to us along the Norfolk coast, they do a 26.2 marathon walk along the Norfolk coast, which raises quite a lot of money. Quite a few thousand people do that every year. I think that was in May last year, if I remember correctly. So again, there's lots of different things that kind of they're doing to try and, because cancer, people are always being diagnosed. I think the crazy statistic that still blows my mind to this day is that 1 in 2 people will receive a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, we often mention that statistic, don't we?
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So I think, again, until we find a cure for cancer, there is always going to be a need for support. I think it's completely outrageous to think that no cancer patient would need some support in some regard.
Yeah.
So whether that be just a one-off phone call, or whether that be kind of regular support with phone calls and referrals to different services, unfortunately these things cost money.
Yeah.
So actually being able to kind of give into charities like Macmillan is incredibly important, and we rely on kind of donations to keep us going, really. So again, it's always incredibly appreciated, the donations that is, but then it goes a long way as well.
And then of course there's the fun runs as well.
Yes.
Lots of those.
Yes.
Is Macmillan's isn't the Race for Life, is it? That's
I believe that's Cancer Research that do that one. Yeah.
Yeah, but I know various people have done various runs and all that.
Yeah.
So, but talking about the coffee morning, I used to work in a school for the last sort of 10 years of my working career, and this lady always used to have a coffee morning for the staff every single year.
Yeah.
And we come to expect the time of year when it was going to be, and she raised loads of money for it. So that was my first sort of real involvement with Macmillan, and then obviously now it's a lot more involved. But one of the good thing is, like you've said about calling people. Everybody who's said they're going to call back have called back. You know, that's the good thing, and it just puts your mind at rest that you can come in here and ask a question, and if they don't answer it, then we'll get back to you. And sure enough, they do. So
when I come to West Suffolk Hospital, I come to West Suffolk Hospital and I come around the back, and then I come to the Macmillan unit. So down the corridor, you've got a number of beds.
Yeah.
So the beds, are they provided by West Suffolk or are they provided by Macmillan?
No, they're provided by the hospital.
Yeah.
So my understanding of that, the Macmillan unit, so again, the outpatients department that we're sitting in now was originally funded by Macmillan and paid for by Macmillan, but now it is overseen by the trust that kind of runs the hospital.
Providing support to the patients who are on the wards and the outpatients.
Yeah, everybody that kind of is receiving their diagnosis or treatment here at the West Suffolk. So that covers the whole of the West Suffolk, what we call primary care network.
Right.
So we've got GP surgeries and kind of patients that live as far as Newmarket up to Stowmarket. But I think there's something like, I was at a meeting last week and somebody was saying about the area of the kind of that we cover. I want to say it's something like 22 100 square miles. I could be wrong with that.
Yeah.
But then we're quite in a funny area of West Suffolk, because we also have patients that come from across the border into Norfolk. And yeah, exactly like you, Martin. And again,
guilty as charged.
Yeah, and then people are like in Cambridgeshire. So like we're going like Burwell, just on the other side of Newmarket. So I think kind of, again, we're in like quite a funny little area here.
Yeah.
And I think then again, the needs of people vary a lot as well. We've got a lot of areas of deprivation in our local community. And in the service that I do through my team, we've actually been assessing that quite a lot recently to really look at if there's areas of our community that are struggling more than others. And if there's things that we need to offer more particularly in those communities to try and increase that kind of access to support. I cover more of the east end of the area, kind of talking Brandon, Mildenhall and Newmarket. And even in those three market towns, the variation between the three is quite a lot. Obviously, we've got quite a big racing influence in Newmarket.
Yeah.
But then kind of looking down towards more Brandon and Mildenhall, it is a bit more deprived. So again, demand for need is different in those places.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that people don't always need support in more affluent areas. It's sometimes just that their needs are different.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny you should say that, because I'm obviously outside the catchment area of Suffolk, and I'm a little bit further than Thetford. I'm actually in Riddlesworth.
Yep.
But when it came to, I was having lungs drained and getting rid of sharps, I'm registered with a Suffolk hospital.
Yeah.
I've got a Suffolk surgery in Stanton.
Yeah.
But my local council for picking up things like, waste products, which is the yellow bags, obviously, is Norfolk.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the biggest frustrations with the whole system in the UK, really, that it does become sometimes a bit of a postcode lottery as to where you live, as to what services you're able to access. And I don't think that just counts for cancer care. I've got friends who live in the northern part of the country, and their maternity services, they've just had 2 children recently, and it's very different up there to it is down here and the support that they receive. But again, like you say, even just more locally to us, people have different areas in which they can receive support, or what they're entitled to through their local council or things like that. So it does vary an awful lot, and it's trying to make sure that people understand what they're eligible for and how they access that.
And that's where you come in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we do a lot of research into things like that. Predominantly when we started the service, now I'm rolling the clock back, our service launched 4.5 years ago. And at the time we were kind of probably quite naive in the fact that we thought everything would be the same for everybody. And yes, the bulk load of the patients that we were speaking to initially did live in West Suffolk, and they could all access the same support. But then as we get in more and more patients come through the service and more of them are living in Norfolk, we would try to ring and do a referral for some patients that lived in that area, and actually like, oh no, they live across the border, they can't access this service. You need to speak to the Norfolk equivalent. And again, it's doing all that research to find out all these different things. Unfortunately, that's something that we're able to do. So now I know if I'm ringing a patient across the border, let's say, again, that I need to look at other areas of support. But then there's some things that are offered to Suffolk, but then there's nothing available for Norfolk and Cambridgeshire at all.
Yeah.
So again, it really does vary where you live to what you can access sometimes. And I think kind of it needs to be made more of a level playing field. And I think kind of it's difficult for us to have an influence on that on a local level. But fortunately, we do have kind of conversations with people who look after Macmillan more nationally. So we are able to address these things. But again, that's something, a lot of these services are council funded.
Yeah.
So again, it then goes back to a government level,
right,
which obviously is hard to influence nowadays. But yeah. I think it's things don't get changed if things aren't raised. So I think we try to raise things wherever we can and hope that things will change.
Right. When I've had 2 heart attacks. Martin's on the cancer side, so he knows more about cancer than I do. But one thing I noticed is the mental attitude of people around me who had had the same. We went to rehabilitation, and we all have a different mental attitude towards our illness. But the majority of them were really down, whereas both Martin and myself are pretty perky about our illness and push on. You must have seen thousands of patients. Do you think a positive mental attitude helped their recovery and help their treatments?
Incredibly.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most key thing. I try to really encourage it with every single person that I speak to on the phone. And I encourage people that are struggling mentally to try and really find that positive area of their life that they can really use that to motivate them through day to day.
Yeah.
And if people have got that already, I make sure that it's acknowledged and they recognise it in themselves, because I think, again, it just really helps you to motivate you through those really difficult days.
Yeah.
Psychological support is one of our biggest signposting. So as I say, our local charity for the hospital pays for a counsellor that works with our cancer patients. And kind of the referral figures for her have doubled since the start of COVID.
Right.
So I would say that, again, there is a great need for mental health support, and it's something that kind of we locally and Macmillan nationally are offering. Macmillan now also kind of on a national level offer free counselling via their website. People can go onto the website and sign up for that. I have a patient that I've been supporting in Newmarket who has accessed that recently and seen great benefit from it. So again, it's trying to make these services accessible.
Yeah.
Because if you go down the private route for counselling, that can cost you an arm and a leg. I know people that have been paying hundreds of pounds for sessions for like that. But fortunately, we're in a position to offer that for free. Again, there is criteria that people have to meet for that. And if somebody isn't appropriate for our kind of sort of counselling services that we offer, then we will try to look at other alternatives that's more suitable for them. But I think, like you say, having a really positive mindset is key. But I think sometimes it is really hard to find that, especially if you're living with a terminal diagnosis. People may be living alone. They're kind of sitting at home with their own thoughts for every day. And obviously I can speak to them, say, for half an hour once a week, but then you're left for almost the rest of the week with your own thoughts. And it's sometimes really hard to get out of that kind of spinning web of emotions, kind of the emotional toll. Unfortunately, we have other things apart from counselling that we can sign into. We have support groups that we're, in the last year or so, we've set up 3 new support groups in the different market towns across West Suffolk. So again, kind of, we're signposting to that a lot. And I know particularly one of our groups has just skyrocketed since we started. So I think, again, people are recognising a need for that. But I think actually kind of talking about mental health as well is really key. I think kind of even speaking to my parents who are in their 60s, they have always said to me that speaking about mental health 30, 40 years ago just wasn't done. It wasn't recognised, and it wasn't even seen as a condition. It was just part of your everyday life, and it wasn't recognised. But I think now, with it just being part of everyday conversation and just trying to normalise it that little bit more, it almost empowers people to talk about it and give them the confidence to do so.
Yeah, I think sort of coming from the 70s myself, mental health, anxiety, stress, it didn't exist.
No.
It's just pick yourself up and get on with it.
Yes.
And we are old-fashioned in this country. It doesn't matter what you say. We don't like talking to people. No. So we've got to sort of open that up somehow, haven't we?
Yes.
Yeah. So your with your day-to-day job, how much does it split in between calling people or people coming in here, or what's the ratio?
So what we try to really do is, my normal working day is from 8:30 till 4:30. Now, what I will try to do is I will start calling people a kind of around about 10 o'clock. So I normally have an hour and a half or so in the morning where I'm trying to catch up on admin and things and these sort of things. But whereas I will then spend most of my day between 10 and say 3:30 speaking to people. Dependent on how many people I've got a day, I'm normally on the phone for about 20 to 30 minutes to each patient. Quite often what I'm doing as well is, once I've spoken to the patient, if I'm then offering them different forms of support, whether that be through referrals, I like to try and get that done after I've done each call as well. So again, I'm normally speaking to 5 or 6 different patients a day. Sometimes it's more than that. But then again, it's dependent on how much I've got to action from those calls. But again, fortunately, my role is quite flexible, that it allows me to work from home some days. So if I've had a day where I've had to call more and more people on one given day, if I can then have a work from home day later in the week, what I usually do is make that my admin day. I try and get caught up of all the things that I've had to action from those calls. But then again, I'm out in clinic 3 or 4 times a month, where I'm holding clinics more local to people. So rather than speaking over the phone, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is we do a lot of blue badge applications, and they're a lot easier to do face-to-face than over the phone. There's referral forms that you have to fill online. There's documentation that you have to scan into the system. So to be able to do that with somebody face-to-face, and then they know they've got the satisfaction that they've seen me do it and the application's been submitted. So as I say, I'm out in clinic about 3 or 4 times a month doing that. I then also help to run our cancer support group in Newmarket, so I'm out at that one Tuesday afternoon every month as well. And then again, there's different events that we sometimes hold in Bury Town Centre, and other different events that we get involved with. So there is a nice mix of being here at the hospital, working from home, and then attending all these different community events as well.
So in a typical conversation, say a half an hour conversation in the course of a day, what would that comprise of?
Well, I think a lot of patients we find, as I say, the majority of patients that we're speaking to are receiving treatment at that time.
Yeah.
So we've found that actually a lot of patients like to inform us of every stage of their pathway. And what I mean about that is they like to tell us what they've been speaking to their consultant about in their appointment, where they're at in their treatment, how they're responding to treatment. Quite often what I'm having to do is, say if a patient has had a review with their consultant and they're having a CT scan, sometimes I will make sure that the CT scan's been requested, because we all know how busy clinicians can be. Sometimes these things are missed by accident. So sometimes I'll go onto the system and make sure they've been requested. And obviously sometimes if these are then booked, it takes a couple of days for the patient to receive a date for when this appointment's been booked. So sometimes I'll inform them of their appointment dates. We'll discuss their side effects, and if they want a bit more kind of information about that. So there's quite a lot of different Macmillan information booklets, as I said about before, about the diagnosis and treatment. But then there's also about dealing with the side effects. So, for example, there's a booklet about fatigue. There's a booklet about breathlessness, about your appetite and kind of healthy eating. So if there's kind of topics like that we've discussed during a call, I will make sure that I'll get those information booklets sent out to people as well. Quite often hospital transport is another big thing, especially for a lot of our elderly people that come to the hospital, especially if they live by themselves. If they're having treatment and they're not feeling 100% great, you're not going to be wanting to drive to your appointments as well. So we arrange hospital transport for people. So quite often I spend quite a lot of time trying to organise that for people as well, because that means I have to ring the transport service, get that booked, and then ring the patient back to let them know that it's all sorted. We provide very basic psychological support. We're trained to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But then, as I say, if I feel that then there's a greater need for a bit more expertise than what I can, I will talk through with the patient about maybe referring to our counsellor. And then again, there's a form that I have to fill out. So I quite often do that over the phone with patients, because that really asks about their own emotions at that state. And it's hard for me to do that if I'm not speaking with the patient at the time. So again, quite often we're filling out these referral forms over the phone with the patient if they're happy to do so. Or if they prefer to do it face-to-face, this is when I then invite them to come to one of my clinics at the local health centres. So we can do it in person. So I think sometimes face-to-face contact is a lot more personal than over the phone.
Yeah, that sounds very exhausting, Martin, doesn't it?
It's just amazing the amount of work that goes on that you don't realise.
No.
Yeah.
I come in and I've seen you in here, and I was chatting one day, hence talking about this podcast. And I haven't realised the amount of work that goes on, and that's not just you. Mm-hmm. There's how many is there?
So there's in our Cancer Care Navigator service, there's myself and my 2 colleagues. So myself and then my colleague Joe and my colleague Helen, we work with what we call primary care networks. And what that really is a network of GP surgeries throughout the West Suffolk. So I believe you might want to tell me that I'm wrong here, but I believe within West Suffolk, there is 19 GP surgeries. So we've split that up into 3 different areas. So as I say, I cover what's called Forest Heath, which is Brandon, Mildenhall and Newmarket and kind of surrounding villages. And then my other colleagues cover those. So there's the three of us that do this, and then we've got our information centre that we're sitting in as well, and that's kind of my colleagues Jules and Louise manage that separately.
Because this is Louise's office, isn't
Yes,
it
is.
Yeah.
So they really provide a kind of face-to-face contact and drop-in centre for patients that are coming into the hospital on a day-to-day basis and can provide support here. Whereas us navigators, we kind of provide the same sort of role, but for people at home. So as I say, speaking to them on a day-to-day at home and then coming down to see us in health centres as well. So it's really nice to have the two services because although they're very similar in what we offer, but actually then we're also very different in terms of providing support here at the hospital and then providing support out in the community.
Yeah. And then there's the lady, what's the lady at the back?
So we've got Madeline, our manager, who oversees it all. Yeah. So she oversees both of our teams. And we've then got Michelle, our counsellor, who I've mentioned about already. But then there is a kind of, we've also now got our own Macmillan physio. We've got Angela, who again, we refer into a lot as our service. So Angela deals a lot with kind of particularly, say, for example, breast cancer ladies who have had surgery and are having issues with their post-op recovery. Maybe they've got tenderness in their operation site. Quite a lot of patients, particularly in breast, will have lymph node biopsies under their armpit, and they actually sometimes find that that is more discomforting than actually the surgery to the breast itself. So quite often we refer to Angela for help with their recovery. She can also help with fatigue management. Again, fatigue is a big thing that we kind of see a lot to what. So Angela deals with that, managing breathlessness as well. Angela can help with her physio, and she offers home visits as well. So if people aren't able to get out to an appointment, Angela is happy to go and see them. So there's a real holistic approach now, and the service has really grown in these last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. Do you have a dietary?
We do have an acute dietitian here at the hospital who deals with cancer patients on the ward. We then have a community dietitian service that we can refer into for patients at home as well.
I think I've met when I was in G1.
Yeah,
someone came round to me and spoke about it. Yeah, so I've probably met one of them.
Yeah.
So,
I think the biggest problem is the diagnosis, and it's the first time for that person.
Yeah.
So do you approach them, or do they approach you for the first time?
It varies.
Right.
So we regularly meet with the medical teams at the hospital here, particularly the clinical specialist nurses that work in all the different specialties of the hospital. So the medical teams are aware of our service. So if they're having conversations with a patient and their families during the time of diagnosis, and they feel there is a need that needs to be addressed and it's kind of under our service, then what quite often will happen is that the clinical nurse specialist will refer to us at the point of diagnosis and say, this is John, for example, he needs help with his finances. Are you able to contact him? So as long as the patient has given consent for the clinical nurse specialist to share their details with us, what we'll then do is we'll instigate contact and say, this is what we do. Believe you've spoken with your nurse who said that you're having some difficulties with your finances. This is what we can offer. Are you happy for us to help?
Yeah.
So that's one way of what we do our referrals. And then what we also do is we have an agreement with the hospital where we have the NHS loves data. Yeah. We absolutely love data. So what we do is we have a monthly report of all the newly diagnosed cancer patients at the hospital. We receive that from our information team. And then what we do is we have a look at that to see all the patients that we are already aware of, if they've been referred from their GP or their nurse specialist. For any other patients that we aren't aware of thus far, we have a look at them at the service. If they're then eligible for the support that we offer, we then will instigate contact with them. We send them a letter just to say, this is who we are, this is what we do. If you'd like to kind of get involved with what we're offering, give us a call. But then if we don't hear with them within 2 weeks, we then call them as well.
Oh, okay.
So kind of within 14 days of us receiving that report, they'll have at least had a letter from us and a telephone call. So we're trying to speak to absolutely everybody that gets a diagnosis. And it might well be that they say, no, I'm managing fine at the moment, but thank you for letting us know. But what I always try to encourage us to do is we send a leaflet and it's got our telephone numbers on. So I said, well, maybe just stick our leaflet on the fridge door or something like that and just say, give us a call if we can ever be of help. And sometimes people do, or if not, if I call them on the first time after they've had a letter, and then I speak to them every 2 weeks throughout their treatment and beyond, really.
Yeah.
So we just like to try and make as many people aware as what we can, really.
Right. Do you, when you're making these telephone calls to, obviously everybody, as we discussed, have different mental attitude towards their cancer. Do you ever have a call with a client that you just struggle to put the phone down with?
What do you mean in terms of?
Well, they're very needy and they're.
I think some people are just incredibly appreciative of the support, and I think especially if people are isolated, then having somebody to talk to is a great thing. So I completely appreciate that. But obviously, yes, we do need to be able to free ourselves up to speak to other people at the time. But if I then get the sense of that somebody is really kind of needing that extra bit of support, and I can't offer them all the time that they particularly need, obviously I will try and provide all the support from a cancer perspective as much as we can. Yeah. But we're very fortunate in this area that we've got other services that we can then tap into as well. One of those is the voluntary network. They run a service called the Befriending Scheme. Now, during COVID, we referred a lot to them because, as you can imagine, during COVID, a lot of people were isolated in their own homes. So through the befriending service, they were able to ring people on a weekly basis and just provide more of a friendly chat, just talking about everyday things, talking about the football, the weather, whatever it may be. So again, if I can only ring somebody once a month, but I feel they need more regular contact, I would quite often refer to the telephone befriending service. Yeah. Now, fortunately that we've stepped out of COVID, the befriending service is also offering services face-to-face back in people's homes. And they even do take people out for teas and coffees and go to the garden centre or whatever for things like that.
Oh, excellent.
So it's sometimes, if people do have an increased level of need and kind of contact, if I'm not able to provide that, it's looking at these other services and actually saying, I think you'd really benefit from speaking to these people because they can call you a bit more regularly than what I can. So actually we're just managing the need more efficiently rather than just palming people off because they take up too much of our time.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because one of the things we came in for was for my wife, because I've felt throughout my cancer that I've not needed to speak to anybody because I think you probably know I've got this PMA that I'm quite happy. I can see myself through it, but my wife is struggling, and so I think she needs to see someone. But now it's handy that you're saying that people are coming back into the homes because she likes to talk to someone rather than talk to somebody on the phone. And everybody's different, aren't they?
Yeah.
And so hearing that is fantastic because I can tell her then now, perhaps to get in contact again to do that.
Yeah, I think there is always a need. I think we all know that cancer doesn't just affect the patient. It affects everybody around them as well. And we really see that on a day-to-day basis. We speak to a lot of loved ones, whether that be partners, whether that be children or grandchildren, and there is a lot of support out there. We've got two big kind of carer organisations and charities in Suffolk that we refer a lot to, both called Suffolk Family Carers and the other Suffolk Carers Matter, and they provide more specific support for people that are living with a loved one who's going for a diagnosis. They also offer counselling for loved ones as well. We've got St Nicholas Hospice up the road that again provides family support with people that are living through a terminal diagnosis. So we're able to provide support for them. Then again, more within our own services within the hospital and our information centre here. People may have heard of Macmillan's HOPE course. Now that stands for Help in Overcoming Problems Effectively. And originally the HOPE course was set up for cancer patients who were coming towards the end of their treatment and adjusting to life after cancer. The information centre here run the HOPE course 3 or 4 times a year. And it's a 6-week course that kind of meets face-to-face. And it's normally for a group of about 12 to 14 people. And they cover a lot of the topics that kind of are raised at the end of a diagnosis. So, for example, fear of reoccurrence, getting back to work, issues with sex and kind of intimacy and things like that as well. But then again, what we've now done is we've adapted the HOPE course locally to offer that to loved ones and family members. So we're actually calling that My Rocks. So you find that a lot of people say, well, she's my rock. She's really got me through this. So we wanted to really recognise that. So as I say, we've launched this Hope course for carers called My Rocks, and that's starting later this year. And I know that we've actually got a lot of interest in that already. And
so
I
that's
think,
not the one that Louise runs currently?
So Louise runs Hope, along with some volunteers.
Because my wife went to that. And she found that really helpful.
Yeah. So then we've got My Rocks as well.
So if anybody's listening in the local area, and these courses are fantastic. My wife really, found, well, her questions were answered.
Yeah.
You know.
Sorry, yes, I just remember they did run one last year, so it's probably what your wife did go to along to. Yeah.
One of the all-time questions, Martin, we always ask, don't we, in this scenario, is
yes,
the cancer bell. Is that the one you thought I was going to come up
with?
No. Oh, right, okay, fair enough. What's your view on the cancer bell? Because there seems to be a bit of controversy over that, given that some people can ring it and some people will never ring it.
I think for people that are on a non-curative pathway, or a patient that has got a diagnosis that can't be cured, I think that can be really disheartening.
Yeah.
But then again, for a patient that has been cured from their cancer and they've received treatment, I think it's an incredibly important thing to acknowledge.
Yeah.
That you've got to that point. And I know when I've been speaking to patients and they've come to the end of the treatment, I've said, do something to celebrate it, whether that be big or small. I've had people that have booked holidays, they've gone out for a big meal in London or somewhere like that. So I think for a patient to be able to do something like that in a hospital setting and provide hope for other patients is quite motivating. If, for example, if you're doing that in the waiting room, you've just finished your treatment, you've got people that are going through treatment at that point, seeing somebody ring the bell like that could fill somebody with hope if they know that treatment is being aimed to cure the cancer.
Yeah.
But then I think for somebody who has a terminal diagnosis, like you say, you're never going to be able to ring that bell. And I think I can't imagine what that must feel like.
No.
So I think the real issue, or the real thought I have, is just to be sensitive to those around you. And I think the last thing I would want people to do is rub it in people's faces. I've been cured from my cancer, and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Because yes, I say it's important to acknowledge that you've come to the end of the treatment and it's been successful. But just to remember that that's not the same case for everybody around you.
No, we get the same sort of answer, really. Generally.
Yeah, Dr. Patterson said more or less the same as well.
Yeah.
So,
all the people who've rung the bell have, of course, said, that was a fabulous thing to do.
Yeah.
But no, the question I was going to ask was the one that we used to ask lots and lots of people when we were talking about, do you know where your nearest defibrillator is?
Well, there's multiple in the hospital, I know that for sure.
But at home?
Funnily enough, at home, yes, I do.
Oh, good.
There is one at the church on the estate that I live in.
Yeah,
and funnily
brilliant.
enough, it was the church I used to go to.
Yeah.
So I know that is there.
You mentioned about several leaflets that you give out to people, but I noticed there was lots of recipe magazines and things like that.
Yeah.
That was amazing, because I said to you, didn't I, I'm going to do a topic on good eating and healthy food for people and all that. So,
I don't think I'll be around for that one.
So obviously you've hit the nail on that. So are there any other courses sort of currently running?
So the other thing that's been a big, very popular at the moment has been our creative workshops. So they were launched by our information centre last year, if not the year before. So they run again about 3 or 4 times a year. Mainly aimed at people who are coming towards the end of the treatment, if not just recently completed. So last year we did some wildlife photography. We're very fortunate to have Nowton Park near the hospital. It's quite a big kind of area for people to go out for walking and just enjoy nature in the countryside. So we teamed up with somebody locally who did a lot of kind of wildlife photography. So we had a group for patients that could go out and do that. We provided all the camera equipment and things like that. We've also done, around Christmas time, we had a kind of a Christmas card making workshop. Again, the Christmas wreaths that you hang on your door, we did some of those. And I know that we're just about looking at starting some in March, April, so that I would have thought that would be a lot of Easter things.
Oh, excellent.
So again, there's things like that that we're trying to really offer, again, just to sometimes have a complete break away from the whole cancer side of things.
Yeah. It's amazing all this going on behind the scenes, I think. How do you put that out to the people? Was this through a magazine or...?
Well, what we try to do is we try to promote it as much as we can in the hospital. We mention it in our conversations to patients over the phone if we're going out to clinics as well. As I say, we've got a lot of contact in the community as well. We speak to a lot of GP surgeries on a regular basis. One of the new roles that are kind of out in the community as well is social prescribers. They're quite often through your GP surgery where you're able to kind of access a lot of support and kind of, I find that social prescribers really have their ears to the ground in terms of what's happening in their local community. Yeah. So we try to kind of provide information to people like them because they speak to a lot of people in their role. So if they've got people that they're supporting through a cancer diagnosis or just after as well, we try to let them know. And again, promoting it through social media and other means as well, really.
Oh, yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, I'm exhausted of all my questions. I've finished.
Yeah, I know. This could go on quite a while.
I know.
It's been absolutely amazing, JP.
Unfortunately, we keep to a certain time. Otherwise, I would have found a dozen more questions for you.
But thank you ever so much for having me on, guys.
You've been fantastic.
Thank you very much, JP.
Thank you for your time.
Well, Martin, I don't think we're going to beat that, are we? That was fabulous.
Yeah, it was. So we hope you enjoyed it, everybody, and we'd like you to tune in again next week.
And the big message there is please support Macmillan as much as you can. Because they need all your support, especially in these hard times.
100%.
Okay, stay safe, everyone.
Ditto.
See you next week.